All right, everyone, welcome to the Total Sports Radio Network. We are going to be doing our NFL team previews. We're going to be breaking this thing down team by team, division by division, all the way until we get up to the Super Bowl. Going to keep you in abreast of what's going on throughout the season with each team, transactions, injury history, pickups. We're going to be doing all that for you, so definitely you want to stay tuned to us as far as all your information pertaining to the 2015-2016 NFL season. I do have my partner in crime with me. Justin, how you doing, man?
What's going on, Will? I'm really happy to do this. NFL is just right around the corner. Training camp is about to open up. Let's do these team previews, man. I'm very excited.
All right, we're going to go ahead and bust out these team previews. There's a couple of teams that Justin wanted to definitely talk about. So we're going to roll over into the NFC. I know one team you want to definitely break down. We'll go ahead and get started on that right now. You want to break down the Detroit Lions.
Yes, sir. I mean, the Detroit Lions are a team I'm very, it's going to be a sleeping team this year. Even if they do have a lot of subtractions like the Ndamukong Suh, the Reggie Bush, the Nick Fairley, I still think that this team can really keep it close with the Green Bay Packers. I'm not saying, one or two games. I think a lot of people really underestimating what this team really does have. The draft was very successful for the team. There is kind of like a little bit of a flaw there. They did fail to really, develop a nice defensive back score. I know they got, Alex Carter out of Stanford in the 3rd round, and also they got Quadre Diggs out of Texas in the 6th round. But outside of that, they really did not develop a solid defensive back score, whether it's through free agency. I mean, I know that the defensive back score was that team's very much kryptonite last year. They were getting, destroyed in the secondary. I still think that this is going to be the team's, position to watch. I feel confident what they have on the offense. We all know what they have on the offense, led by Matthew Stafford, led by none other than Calvin Johnson, Mr. Megatron himself. I like the receiving core. Their tight ends is very solid. I think this team is really much ready to go to battle offensively. Defensive backs wise, that's going to be the main area where they really need to be, key on this year.
Let me ask you a question. I'm going to play devil's advocate a few times with you, kind of put you on the spot a little bit. First, what do you think about Haloti Ngata coming over from the Ravens?
I think it's going to be a big addition. I know he's not up to, the Ndamukong Suh level. I still think Haloti Ngata, throughout his time with the Baltimore Ravens, he was still playing at a top level. Coming over to the Detroit Lions, he's now to a team where, he doesn't have, the guys that are around him. He doesn't have like a Terrell Suggs at linebacker. So he has got to really step it up, even though it is on the defensive line. He's going to be that captain on that defensive side of the ball because when you look outside of that, you do have Ezekiel Ansah who's going to be playing, end next to him. But Ezekiel Ansah has not really, stepped up. So I think that Haloti Ngata's presence is going to really help out Ezekiel Ansah develop a little bit more down the line.
Now, you were saying that you don't trust their DBs per se. Do you think that increased pass rush will kind of make things a little bit easier on that defensive secondary?
Well, last year they were one of the worst. The defensive backs, they don't have a standout, safety outside of Louis Delmas, who formerly played for the team. I think that they took a huge step down, letting him go. I know he kind of downplayed a little bit throughout the end of his career in Detroit. But if what they have on the defensive side of the ball, with Haloti there, Ezekiel Ansah, I'm hoping that he really turns it around for them. Their linebacking core with DeAndre Levy, Kyle Van Noy, I think that could work, but needless to say, what good is a good pass rush if you cannot really defend when it comes to their defensive backs.
Now we need to also talk about an interesting battle that's going on the other side of the football from the offensive standpoint. Do you think Ameer Abdullah will play a big role in the offense this year, coming in as a rookie?
Oh, absolutely. I love Ameer Abdullah. I've always liked him. But, Joique Bell has also made a case for himself last year. I think Joique Bell is very underestimated. This team does have excellent running backs. I do like what they have. Very very, consistent running backs. But I think Ameer Abdullah will be the right choice to start for the Detroit Lions. I like Joique Bell, but you know what? You don't go into the second round. You draft Ameer Abdullah, and he's going to be that predecessor to Reggie Bush. Yes, Reggie Bush was not that, shine all mean player. I know he had one excellent year with the Lions, but they really need somebody to come in and do work. I know Joique Bell does have a lingering issues, injury issues. I think that's going to end up, playing the course of the year. Is he going to end up being 100% healthy? So I think that's the reason why the Lions went out there, got a running back to really, play behind Joique Bell, because they don't want to fall to their third or fourth string running back with a Theo Reddick there, a George Wynn there. They don't want to do that. They want to have an always great backup option. If Joique Bell does get the starting role, they want to go with Ameer Abdullah, or it's vice versa. Say Ameer Abdullah gets injured, you can always go to Joique Bell. So I really like what the Lions did in the draft in getting Ameer Abdullah.
Now, let me ask you one more question, and then we'll move on from the Lions. Talk about maybe the Bears and the Packers. But let me ask you this. Can Calvin Johnson come back healthy this year?
Oh, I'm hoping he does. Calvin Johnson is that solidified, star athlete on this Lions squad. You think of the Lions, you think of Calvin Johnson. I want to see him 100% healthy. For fantasy owners out there, he's always, a legitimate number one option. I think that he's going to end up coming back 100% healthy, and he's ready to ball. Because like I said, I think that this Lions team is going to be very underestimated this year.
Very good, very good. We broke down the Detroit Lions like the champions that we are. Let's move on ahead to another team, possibly the class of the division, in the Green Bay Packers. What's your outlook for the Green Bay Packers this year?
This team has really done a great job. I really like what they did, during the NFL draft. They went out, they got a cornerback in Demarius Randall from my Arizona State Sun Devils. Going down the line, they got Brett Hundley as a backup option for quarterback. The Green Bay Packers have not, don't have that, Class A backup quarterback. I know they do have a Scott Tolzien. I know they went through that phase where they had Vince Young as a backup quarterback, which was kind of like a joke. Matt Blanchard is there, but I think that Brett Hundley coming over to the Packers will really help his career, learning under the greatest quarterback in the NFL right now in Aaron Rodgers. Going down, the rest of the draft, Christian Ringo out of Louisiana Lafayette, a compensatory pick. I think he's going to have a good, career in Green Bay if they keep him around. He was a 6th round selection. Green Bay had 3 6th round selections this year. Also, the Green Bay Packers was able to hold on to John Kuhn, who is one of my favorite fullbacks in the league. Mm-hmm. Also right next to me you have Eddie Lacy, James Starks. The receiving core is going to get lighted up this year. I really am excited for the Packers. DeVante Adams, the guy who was the star of the playoffs. I think a lot of people really underestimate on him. I'm still waiting for a nice breakout year for Jared Abbrederis. He's one of my all-time favorite receivers in football right now, in college football at the time. Randall Cobbs and company, Jordy Nelson. I do expect a huge year continuing on from last year. I think this team is very much set to go. The only question I do have is their linebacking core, as they did take some losses on this offseason at the linebacking position.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. But let me ask you this. Now, you're just talking about the linebacker core taking a big hit the way that they did. Maybe James Waters from Stanford might be able to help the situation?
Yeah, he's going to end up entering the year with a target on his chest. He wants to really stand out from the rest. I think that when you look at the Packers, yes, they did miss out on A.J. Hawk. A.J. Hawk has really declined in recent years, so it's really much time to move on from them. But they still have some interesting players on that roster. They do have a Julius Peppers at outside linebacker, but he is an aging outside linebacker. Mm-hmm. Then you also have Nick Perry. I do like Nick Perry a lot. So, outside that, who's going to end up leading your linebacking core? You do have Clay Matthews, huge Clay Matthews fan. But you know what? Clay Matthews can't do everything by himself. They do have Carl Bradford from Arizona State, my Sun Devils. I did meet him a couple of times, a very nice guy. I do expect, a lot from him down the line in his career. He just needs to see some playing time. I think that when you really, when you look into Julius Peppers, career outside football, you can end up seeing the Packers experiment with, the depth on that roster. Maybe a Carl Bradford can stand out in preseason. Maybe he can get some more time, during the regular season. But they really need to add some more outside linebackers to this team in order to have a little bit more of a better pass rush.
Let me ask you this. Do you think this is the year, and he's always been a great running back since he's been there, but could this be the year that Lacy takes that next step in the stardom?
Oh, it's going to be close. I mean, when you look into the division, you also have Adrian Peterson coming back. This league has got a lot of great running backs. But even though, we all know what happened with Adrian Peterson during the offseason, no one really, likes Adrian Peterson right now. But Adrian Peterson, if he does come back and he still plays at a high level, he's going to have a lot of competition. I want to see Eddie Lacy succeed at being that top guy. You know what? He has it. He can be easily, he's easily a top 5 running back in this league, hands down. You can put him into the the books with the Marshawn Lynch, with the Adrian Petersons, with the Le'Veon Bell. You can put his name right in there. But it's going to be close. I'm really excited to see what Eddie Lacy brings to the plate this year.
Let me ask you this. Tight end. I think Richard Rodgers could be a sleeper, particularly in the role of fantasy, because when you look at the Green Bay Packers, you're thinking about Aaron Rodgers, you're thinking about those receivers. Richard Rodgers gets kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the tight end position, since Jermichael Finley has not been, the premier position for the Green Bay Packers. I mean, if you really want, you can set them up at, at the goal line. That is when Aaron Rodgers really does use his tight ends, because they're always an option at the goal line or in the red zone threat. But guys like Andrew Corliss is a guy who I'm really looking at. Richard Rodgers is a great option. Playing for California, I did see him play a few times. I'm a huge Pac-12 buff myself. Mm-hmm. I expect something big from him this year. A third-round pick in 2014, 20 receptions. 225 receiving yards last year, 2 touchdowns. Maybe this could be the year that he really, stands out, as the, the premier tight end for this team.
Very, 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 very good. I do have one more question. You mentioned DeVante Adams. Earlier this year, training camp, I do believe, started. Everybody looked at DeVante Adams, and everybody reported he was catching everything. So, particularly in the realm of fantasy, which I am a very big fantasy football player as well as you, Justin. I know you're a big fantasy football player as well. DeVante Adams is a guy you definitely want to look at as maybe a 3rd or 4th receiver on your fantasy team.
You know what? It all depends. Well, I love, DeVante Adams is going to be a number 1 option for me if, say, a Jordy Nelson does go down or Randall Cobb does go down, because, DeVante Adams, like you said, he can catch anything thrown his way. I'm very excited for him to come out. His time at Fresno State, even playing with Derek Carr, I expected DeVante Adams to go to the Oakland Raiders during his draft. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, DeVante Adams is an excellent star. I think that when you look at it, Aaron Rodgers is going to end up, spreading the field this year. He's going to get the ball to DeVante Adams, Randall Cobb. But this does hurt, Jared Abbrederis a little bit. You look at the receiving core as a whole. Jordy Nelson is always going to end up being Aaron Rodgers' number 1. Number 2 is going to go to Randall Cobb. DeVante Adams is going to be that number 3. So, pending who you have on your receiving core, you can pick up DeVante Adams midway through the draft. You always want to stack up. I always go quarterback first round, because those are the guys that get you the points. Receivers
Really?
are options that you can get in the middle of the round. Say you have a lot of great wide receivers already taken. DeVante Adams is there. You cannot go wrong with getting him.
Really? So you take quarterback first? That's interesting.
I've always said quarterback first. It's just my philosophy, at getting a nice, solid quarterback. Running back is something that you can always, find. Like last year, I did have an excellent running back game. I forgot who it was on my roster, but I know I averaged like 15, 16 points with two running backs. I don't know if that's because of the scoring or what, but I always like to find a good quarterback that I know that is trustworthy. It can go out there and get me on average about 20 points a game.
Well, we'll definitely be doing a Total Sports Radio Network fantasy podcast. That for sure. That's an interesting theory. What I normally do, I normally look at running back, receiver, running back. But we'll see what everybody's strategy is when we hold on to that fantasy football podcast. Let's move on over on our preview right now. I want to move over to the Chicago Bears, Mr. Jay Cutler himself.
Oh.
What do you think about the Chicago Bears right now?
The Chicago Bears. Where to begin with the Chicago Bears? I mean, they have some players on that team that I like. I really do like the addition of Kevin White to this team.
Yes.
But the quarterback position is not too great. I mean, Jay Cutler... it's Jay Cutler, ladies and gentlemen. Jay Cutler has taken the ultimate step back. The guy is currently, not one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league. He is not worth the contract that he signed a couple of years ago. Last year, God, that was just, it was atrocious. 28 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. I do give him the credit for having 3,000 yards passing, over 3,000 yards passing. But he has got to step it up this year. He has John Fox coming over.
Yes, he does.
John Fox was a mastermind with Peyton Manning.
Yes,
maybe John Fox can be that, maybe John Fox can turn Jay Cutler. I'm not saying he's going to turn into the next Peyton Manning, so people don't be commenting down below saying, you're an idiot for saying that. I'm not saying that Jay Cutler is not going to be the next Peyton Manning. He's not even close. Couldn't even lick the dirt off Peyton Manning's cleats. But I do give the fact that the Chicago Bears have got to be in this rebuilding phase. They have to be rebuilding now. This team was a very, a much older team right now. They're in the process of getting younger. I know Lance Briggs. I think Lance Briggs is actually, done with the team. I think he actually retired during the offseason. So it's now time for a new look for the Chicago Bears. I really do, like what the future has in store for them. Their running back core, it's a bit of a running back. It's a bit of a crowded running back core. You see Matt Forte as their number 1, Kadeem Carey as their number 2. But when you look into the number 3, you're going to have a 3-way battle for this position. You got Jeremy Langford. I think he played for Michigan State, but do not hold that against me. Then you have Jaquiz Rogers coming over from the Atlanta Falcons. Then you also have Daniel Thomas coming over from the Miami Dolphins. So you have a 3-person race for that number 3 spot. If you're a smart fan, you would agree with me that Jeremy Langford is that guy. You can use Jaquiz Rogers as a kick returner. Daniel Thomas could likely be that odd man out of the team.
Yep.
When it turns over to the receiving core, I like the receiving core. Like I said, they did improve a little bit. They got their they got Eddie Royal from the San Diego Chargers. My San Diego Chargers. It's a shame that Eddie Royal will not be with the San Diego Chargers. He's going to end up playing slot receiver for the Chicago Bears, a position where I think slot receivers are very underrated in this league. There's not a lot of teams that have that very speedy fast fast, wide receiver. And Eddie Royal is that. Look what Phillip Rivers did to Eddie Royal's career. He took it to the next level in his time in San Diego. Hopefully that Jay Cutler does use Eddie Royal in the right way. We see more, success with Eddie Royal. Then you also have an Alshon Jeffrey there, who's going to end up being their number one option. Brandon Marshall is no longer there, so Kevin White is going to likely, take in the Alshon Jeffrey role, as Alshon Jeffrey is taking that Brandon Marshall role.
Let me ask you this. First of all, my main concern with the Bears are twofold. First, my concern with the Bears, the defense. And my second concern with the Bears is the offensive line. And if I can go ahead and get a third one in there very, very quickly, are we looking at Matt Forte maybe being on the decline?
You can say that, But, Matt Forte has also been carrying that running back game for quite a while now just by himself. I mean, they also had, Michael Bush on that team, but Michael Bush had one standout year with the Oakland Raiders, and the Bears picked him up, and then the Bears expected him to really, help Matt Forte out. So Matt Forte, yes, he's aging. He's 29, going to be going into age 30 year. Last year, only had 6 touchdowns. I want to say I don't know if that's a career low for him, but it was a bit of a downward spiral for him last year. I did not really expect, Matt Forte to, completely downplay. I think that, he has got to come back. He's got to be a little bit more consistent. But you know what? He's got to have a much, better line. The Chicago Bears are a team that is really much building on that defensive side of the ball, and that's mainly what they did. They did, like I said, they got Kevin White in the draft. They got Eddie Goldman. They got one center out of Oregon. I don't know his name a whole lot, but outside of that, they did not add an offensive guard. They got a 6th round offensive tackle out of TCU. Mm-hmm. They really lack a legitimate guard, and I think that's what's really going to affect them. Hopefully, that these rookies could come in here and really help out with that offensive line. But if if Matt Forte continues to decline, he could end up getting showing that pink slip out of Chicago.
Quickly. Do you have any faith for the Bears defense at all this year?
The Bears defense is very, very, very young. The defensive line in particular. You got Jeremiah Ratliff who is there, who's going to end up being that veteran lineman on this team. You got Eddie Goldman coming out of Florida State. Ego Ferguson in his 2nd year. You also have my boy, Will Sutton, Arizona State, representing there. They have the talent there on the line. Jeremiah Ratliff is going to end up taking that role. And then you turn it over to the linebacking core where it gets a little bit better. I like their I like their linebacking core. They do have 3 excellent linebackers there. Jared Allen, even he is aging as well. He's still producing at a good level. John Bostic is there, a very underestimated linebacker in the entire league. He can rack you up the tackles. Then you also have a guy who I think really needs to step up this year. They do have Shane McClellan, who they drafted in the 1st round a couple of years ago, and Pernell McPhee. I think Pernell McPhee is coming over from the Baltimore Ravens. I think he's been on the team actually this would be his 1st year on the team, so he's coming over to add some depth to this linebacking core in Chicago. I really like their linebacking core. Hopefully that Shea McClellan really develops himself to being that, and having that rightful title of being that 1st round selection.
How about the Bears secondary?
The Bears secondary, it's a little bit up and down. I like what they have. Kyle Fuller's there. That's their corner for the future. They got Tim Jennings there. Tracy Porter, even though he did block me on Facebook, or on Twitter, that's fine with me. He's a good corner. Antrell Roll was one of the questionable decisions I've had. Since leaving the Arizona Cardinals, Antrell Roll had an off and on time with the New York Giants. Coming over to Chicago Bears, it's even scarier because he's an aging safety in the league. I mean, God forbid this Bears team just last year had Adrian Wilson, a guy who played 2 years out of his prime. It's just, it's questionable. I don't want to see Antrell Roll completely, drop the ball. In Chicago, he's likely to have to end up setting for a backup role. But hopefully, this defensive backs core does hold up in Chicago.
I hope so too. I think the league, and I know you can only say this about a few teams, but I think the league is better when you both have the Packers and the Bears being relative.
Of course.
I think that the league is a lot better off with both of those teams relative than, let's say, somebody, one of the new kids on a plot like a Jacksonville or something like that. Not saying that they don't deserve to have their time to shine too, but I just think that when you have a Green Bay Packers, when you have a Chicago Bears, when you have those 2 historic teams being relative in the league is a lot better off for it. And with Chicago not being there, it sort of kind of hurts. So let's see what this team gets done this year. The next team we're gonna move on to right now. Gonna move on to those Minnesota Vikings, and someone who I like a lot is Mr. Teddy Bridgewater. What do you see the Vikings doing this year?
Oh, I think the Vikings are also a team that's going to be, on the rise. I think there's no way but up for the Minnesota Vikings. Teddy Bridgewater has finally got Adrian Peterson, in this running back game. I mean, I know last year they were really much spreading the running back game with Jerick McKinnon. Matt Asiata, who's a natural fullback in my book. He's a little bit of a big running back. I do like what they have a receiver though. The receiver is a critical game. In the Teddy Bridgewater mind. You have got to have a legitimate wide receiving core, and they got that with getting Mike Wallace from the Miami Dolphins, and that's going to help out a whole lot. Teddy Bridgewater likes to take shots down the field. Mike Wallace has been known for taking long strides down the field, like being a deep ball threat. This year, I am very concerned over the production of a Cordarelle Patterson. Cordarelle Patterson scares the shit out of me. Last year he was terrible. I took Cordarelle Patterson in the 9th or 10th round of the draft once the wide receiving core was very much dwindling. He did not produce at all for me. Week 1, he was okay. Beyond week 1, he was just atrocious to have on a Vikings roster. I was like, it would not surprise me if the Vikings look to trade him during the draft process. I know they can get at least a 4th or 5th round selection out of him because he's still very young. He's a slot receiver, and likely this could be the year where Cordarelle Patterson could be on that trading block, or he could end up being on that chopping block. Because honestly, there's a guy coming into this team who a lot of people do not talk about, or even spark a bit of interest in. No disrespect to this guy, but I love this guy. His name is Stephon Diggs out of Maryland. Yes. This guy led that Maryland team in receiving yards a couple of years. I know he does have the injuries. He does have the injury buildup. But if this guy is 100% healthy, you do not want to cover this guy. This guy is fat. He can beat secondaries, and he can end up, being that, red zone threat for the Minnesota Vikings. And I think that a Teddy Bridgewater, Stephon Diggs connection will be a very much of a dangerous receiving core threat right there in Minnesota.
He can definitely open things over the top. For an offense. Now, speaking, you just spoke of Cordarelle Patterson. In a North Turner offense, I think the sky would be the limit for him. Or you would think the sky would be the limit for him in that particular style offense that North likes to run.
Well, North Turner really likes to work with the quarterbacks. North Turner really works through, during his time in San Diego as a head coach, worked through Phillip Rivers. I mean, receiving cores, they deal with, receiving coaches. And Cordarelle Patterson, I don't know what his problem was last year. 33 receptions for 384 yards and only got 1 touchdown.
Yep.
That is just an atrocious year. His rookie year in 2013. In 16 games played, 45 receptions, 469 yards. The guy got 4 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. He played the same amount of games in 2014, and he had a complete...
He had like a sophomore meltdown, per se.
And every down, wide receiver does. So that's why I think the best option is if Cordarelle Patterson, if it's smart for him. He's only 24. He's in the year 24 year. He's still a very young, talented wide receiver. He can be. I don't want to say he can always be a slot receiver. He's 6'2". He's tall. He's fast. He can end up being a number 3 on a team.
Right.
He could be an every down back or every down wide receiver. If the team wants him to be, but if he wants to end up, falling down the ranks, in Minnesota, I would ask for a trade. I will at least ask for a trade because where he's going to end up being. I don't know if there was injury concern for Cordarelle Patterson last year. It was undisclosed, but I still expect a lot from him. I am a Cordarelle Patterson fan, but he killed me in fantasy last year. He was a complete fantasy bust last year. If you have the right mindset, if you're a fantasy player and you're in those deep, 16 to 18 player leagues, which is crazy fun, in Cordarelle Patterson, you have no choice but to get him. You can get him, but I would be very concerned with your decision.
Do you truly believe that Mike Wallace is going to have a big year?
Yes. I promise you. Mm-hmm. Take this note here. I expect Mike Wallace to have a year like the kind of numbers he had out there in Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger. Wow. I'm expecting a whole lot from this Minnesota squad. I think Mike Wallace is going to be their premier, their premier catcher or premier receiver. He's still very young.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot in him. He's entering age 29 year.
Mm-hmm.
No, last year, of all quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill. If Ryan Tannehill can get 10 touchdowns out of Mike Wallace with 862 passing yards, why can't Teddy Bridgewater? Teddy Bridgewater is a great quarterback. I'm not saying he's an elite quarterback. I think that the Minnesota Vikings do have an excellent option at quarterback going down the line, regardless. Hopefully he does not get injured. Last year in his rookie year, 14 touchdowns, 2,000 yards, close to 3,000 yards. I expect a lot this year. I think that that was what the Minnesota Vikings were missing. Greg Jennings ultimately declined, outside of his years in Green Bay. Now that Greg Jennings is now on the road now, going from team to team. He had a stop in Minnesota. Now he's on a stop in Miami. Right. Greg Jennings did not pick up his role like a lot of people expected that he would. In Minnesota, a lot of people expected him to have numbers in Green Bay. In Minnesota, that did not even come close.
Nope.
He's on to Minnesota now. The Minnesota Vikings need a number one receiver that is going to be consistent. Mike Wallace has been there everywhere he has gone. Been there in Minnesota, or been there in Pittsburgh, Miami. You know what? If I can get at least 8 or 9 touchdowns out of him, with roughly around 1,000 yards receiving, he's hit 1,000 yards receiving before in 2010 and 2011. If he can do that in Minnesota, just this year, I can expect big things going forward for Mike Wallace in Minnesota.
Wow. Real quick, I'll be remiss if I didn't touch on the defensive side for the Vikings. Do you think this might be a sleeper defense?
Sleeper defense? No. I still think there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of holes on this defense of the Minnesota Vikings. The sky's the limit when it comes to the linemen and the linebackers. The defensive backs is 100% solid. I like what they have in Harrison Smith. They got Trey Waynes. I am 100% happy. Xavier Rhodes is there. It's still development. The line is very questionable a little bit. I do like what they have. They have a couple of guys that really stands out to me. Brian Robison. I really like Brian Robison a little bit, but he's not going to be your every down. He's not going to be your premier starter. Sherriff Floyd, who got drafted a couple of years ago. But beyond them, they got Cesar Rayford there. The line does lack a lot of depth. When it comes to the linebacking core, it's a completely different story. I think this is where the weakness of the team comes into play. Right. Anthony Barr is as a shell of his college years. I know he's extremely young still. Coming into the league, I was expecting a lot from him. I love Anthony Barr. His times at UCLA, a very dominant linebacker in the Pac-12, killed Arizona State. Audie Cole's there. Chad Greenway, he's an aging linebacker. Casey Matthews he's still lingering around in the NFL. Eric Kendricks is there. I mean, the depth, it's just not good at linebacking core for the Vikings.
Any particular needs of the secondary, maybe?
Particular needs, they do have it. They can always add depth. I mean, Captain Moonerlin, who came over from the Carolina Panthers a season or so ago, I expect Captain Moonerlin to really, step up in a big-time role this year, because I still think this team has what it takes to really take the next step in this in this team's role. A lot of people are really sleeping on the Vikings, expecting them to finish out the year in 4th place. You still expect the Vikings to fall to the Bears. I know it's going to end up being a tight race for the 3rd place team, but if the Vikings can get into 3rd place this year, they're going to have to do it with an excellent offense. Their defensive backs, I'm not worried about. It will be great to add an extra, some depth to that, cornerbacks core, which is going to end up likely getting, run by a Trey Waynes. They do have an Xavier Rhodes. They do have Captain Moonerlin. They do have Jabari Price. A lot of guys who sleep on Jabari Price. I like Jabari Price a whole lot. So, and they also have Josh Robinson, who they got out of UCF a couple of years ago. So, I'm very confident in this this cornerbacks core. Their safety core is very solid, but like I said, it's always good to add some depth to this team.
Yes, it is very, very good to add some depth to that team, because that's the team that needs it. Do you think this might be the year with your offensive coordinator being North Turner? We see a huge year from second-year player Teddy Bridgewater.
Huge year, I'm expecting it. We just have to wait and see how Mike Wallace develops into this offense for the Minnesota Vikings, because you know what, North Turner, I was just talking to my good friend the other day. We were talking about how North Turner is. North Turner is a genius when it comes to particular quarterbacks. Teddy Bridgewater is a quarterback on the rise. I expect, a big year from Teddy Bridgewater, but I think, North Turner is a bit out of date in his kind of coaching. But if Teddy Bridgewater goes into this coming year and he's able to throw up the stats that he put up last year, like I said, he had an 85.2 quarterback rating last year. 14 touchdowns, 12 interceptions killed. I don't want to praise Teddy Bridgewater for what he did last year. Turnovers killed him. If he cuts down on the interceptions, I want to say he can end up being a quarterback that can reach 20 to 23 touchdowns this coming year.
Oh.
If he can do that, I think that he's going to end up being one of the most underrated, one of the most untalked about quarterbacks in the league because, yes, he does play for the Vikings, a team that does kind of fail in the at the linebacking core. Mm-hmm. That fails a lot. The midfield, they do lose a lot of yardage, or they do have opposing teams gain a lot of yardage because their linebacking core does not help. It's going to be a big question there. I think that if a good defense can help out, I think that if you have Teddy Bridgewater on the field, you can expect a lot of things from Teddy from coming into this coming year. Hopefully that North Turner coaches Teddy Bridgewater correctly. Last year, it was just a little taste to what to expect from Teddy Bridgewater going forward.
All right. Went ahead and got the NFC East done for you guys. Got it broken down like a champion.
NFC North.
Got NFC North. I'm sorry. NFC North done like a champion. My fault. Man, been a long day. NFC North broken down like a champion for you guys. So definitely, we got you covered. All things NFL. Couple of things real quick. Do you want to do the AFC North while we're here?
Oh, I think we should let the fans, get a taste of the AFC North tomorrow. I think we can pre-record this and put it up on here on the YouTube channel, and for you guys to listen to your listening pleasure tomorrow. I think we're just going to end up doing, a division by day is what the best way to approach this.
Cool.
So I think that's going to be the best thing to do. So.
But don't forget, guys, we're going to finish breaking down all the divisions. We're going to review each division, let you know the ins and outs, draft picks and so forth. So definitely keep up with us for that. We're also going to be doing the fantasy football special for those who play fantasy football, which is a whole lot of us. So definitely don't forget about that. Justin, before we get out of here, do you have anything else you want to hit us with tonight?
Hopefully Teddy Bridgewater really has it coming this year. Hopefully Adrian Peterson can really come back. I mean, I am not a fan of the guy right now. There's a lot of personal issues around it involving his son. I don't like the way he went about that whole situation. I don't like Adrian Peterson personally. On the field, he is the man. The guy can run. The guy can lead an offense. And hopefully with this new restructured deal that the Minnesota Vikings gave him, have him stick around, that Teddy Bridgewater can officially be that rising quarterback in the league. I am very excited to see what the Vikings can do, as well as the Detroit Lions. I think those are the two underrated, untalked about teams that can really make a big splash going into the 2015-2016 year.
Wow, we'll definitely keep you up to date on what those teams do. Justin, thank you. Appreciate you breaking down those teams. If there is nothing else, guys, don't forget, we're going to be keeping up with all the action during the NFL season, all the way up to the Super Bowl, the Pro Bowl. Going to be still doing professional wrestling. Heck, we're going to do some basketball, and maybe if we can get some people in here, might even touch baseball. Oh my goodness, did I just say baseball? Oh my goodness, I think I did say baseball. So definitely keep it tuned to us, Total Sports Radio Network. For Justin, for myself, William Morgan, your host and moderator, I thank you guys for being with us tonight. Go ahead and close it out with the way we brought it in. Here we go.